Again, welcome to the Digital Leaders Series spotlighting McDonald's Canada. I'd like to now hand the floor over to your speaker, Mike Marks, Head of Marketing, Financial Services Industry, Travel and Hospitality in Canada. Mike, you have the floor.
Hey, thank you, Phil. I can confirm I am Mike Marks, not Michael. Michael was only used by my mother when I was in trouble, and that wasn't very often, but definitely more than she wanted it to be. My mother, God bless her soul, like most parents around the world, literally bribed their kids to be good with a possible trip to Mickey D's, McDonald's, of course, which is catnip for children. And so I must have done something well here today, booking today's featured guest, because we're going to take a virtual trip to McDonald's and speak with the VP and CTO, Lara Skripitsky. So we're going to hear from Lara in a few minutes, but first I wanted to help set the stage with some recent acquired industry data and an inside look into the thoughts of the 200 of North American restaurants' senior executives. And while we do that, and while we hear from Laura, I too want to encourage you as part of our audience to enter your questions into the chat box on the left-hand side of your screen. We'll address them at the end of the session. If we run out of time for whatever reason, we'll make sure to share the responses in an email to all the registered guests post-event. But first, let's take a look at what 2020 has done to our beloved industry. Now, the obvious point here is that the global pandemic has had significant impact on the dining industry, as it has on all others. But interestingly, though, it's really how the top brands in the industry are dealing with it. So customer engagement has been impacted across the board with digital transformations that have been sped up by years. And in many cases, the intended direction changed due to health considerations and even government actions. Drive-throughs have been beefed up, so to speak. There's a bad pun. Digital tech, including mobile apps, have been prioritized. Third-party delivery services have become the standard, and even food production has been impacted. And of course, sadly, many of our familiar brands have fallen. For many, these aren't really unexpected. But to make today's session most valuable for you, let's drill down a little bit deeper, and let's hear from those executives on the front lines on what they're thinking and what is driving their initiatives and their specific concerns. Now, one way we can do that is with the results of a recent survey of 200 senior executives from North America's top restaurant brands. And I want to take the opportunity now to introduce you to and put a plug in for our valued partner, Publicis Sapient, who together with Adobe conducted this research. Now, David Taylor from Publicis Sapient and Julie Hoffman from Adobe, well, they led the charge and recently delivered an Adobe Digital Leaders session like the one we're on today. They delivered that a couple of weeks ago, specifically on this survey and its results. I'll include a link to that session as well as a link to the summary report in my post-event email that goes out to everyone who registered on today's session. But I don't want to steal their thunder. However, I do want to set the context for our discussion with Lara, and I thought you'd quickly appreciate reviewing the key findings of the report itself. Now, the pandemic has shifted how we as customers are buying. You know, whether it's third-party delivery ordered online, contactless service, mobile apps, and harnessing all the golden data that is captured by leveraging digital technology. The digital transformation enables these necessary pivots, and the brands that survive are the ones who focus on the digital technology itself. Clearly, the pandemic has necessitated these previous 5-year digital transformations are now having to become reality in 5 months or less. And really only the agile will survive. The results of the survey certainly support that notion. And in less than a year since COVID-19 hit North America, in-store engagements dropped dramatically, and third-party delivery, branded mobile apps, and website ordering have filled that gap. Now, we know that we have a vaccine, many vaccines on the way, but they're still months away. By the time that they are delivered and go through different rounds to become effective, we're still going to be dealing with this. And it's going to be interesting to see if we ever go back to the way that we were in 2019, or will these new leading methods of customer interaction become the new normal and become the standard? And we can see just on the chart itself somehow how that's already changed so dramatically and so quickly, where the third-party apps, the branded mobile apps, the website, they're really filling that gap. Now, overwhelmingly, our surveyed restaurant executives said yes, we need to go to new technology, and 83% say that contactless is here to stay, and that mobile technology, specifically mobile app, is the future. But I would argue that more accurately, it's the standard today and the future. But here's the cool part. Now, they are betting on these new and enhanced technologies driving better customer experiences than what was offered previously. So the executives are turning this horrific, setback into a catalyst for better things. And effectively, I guess they're turning lemons into lemonade, which is no surprise because that's what many of these brands literally do. Mobile devices, they're driving data, and the data drives personalization. And those are ways to better anticipate customers' preferences, delivering easier and better experiences overall. Better communications itself creates stronger loyalty and opportunities to make the customer feel special and valued. And you can see how a lot of these technologies are being anticipated to stay and be able to deliver on those better customer experiences. Now, some data has always been available, but with enhanced digital interactions, the quantity and the quality of the data is better than ever before, which can be absolutely crushing. And it's coming in from many sources, which brings its own issues like security and accuracy. Now, the executives, they recognize that this data isn't of itself the advantage, but rather being able to effectively leverage the data, that's really the goal. In technology, specifically AI, enables brands to synthesize the data, revealing relevant insights while making it actionable at scale and on demand. Just think about the evolution of the industry itself. Restaurants are in a totally different world now. Back in the day, the key skills that they had to master were to know when to flip the burger and how to make the special sauce. Well, data and AI will be today's special sauce, but it certainly comes with challenges. And our executives that we surveyed recognize that data does bring its own issues, but not data alone. Data technology in general creates challenges when designing contactless experiences as well as planning for digital transformation. And you can see here that security, business strategy, and the human element, so the people in the process, they top both lists. But what was a little surprising for me specifically was that cost was only a concern in about 30% of the cases. Executives seem to be willing and able to put their money where their mouth is, so to speak. Hey, Phil, why don't we take this opportunity now to put up our first poll question, and let's figure out what it is that our audience is looking at in terms of their perspective. So over the last 10 months, dining experiences have dramatically changed. What are your thoughts on how the QSR and fast casual industry has evolved? So would you say it's amazing how fast the industry has pivoted? Would you say that the industry is responding as expected? Would you say that some brands are responding well, but many are lagging? Or would you suggest that you've expected more from the industry as a whole? So please take a moment. This is real time in terms of results. You can see the bars switching quickly back and forth there. And it seems to be a split. And the split, 75-25 so far, is more so the majority were saying that some brands are responding well, but many are lagging. And then the top is, or the second option is, it's amazing how fast the industry has pivoted. Interesting. Well, now we're going overwhelmingly towards brands, some responding well and some are lagging. Interesting. Okay, thanks, Phil. Let's close that poll. But enough about the survey results, because we're also very fortunate to have Lara Skripitsky, the VP and the CTO of McDonald's in Canada, here today. So she's going to be joining us on the virtual stage in a minute. And honestly, there is no better company to hear from on this than McDonald's, and certainly no one better suited to share these insights than Lara, the CTO. So good afternoon, Lara. How are you? Thank you for joining us.
Hi. I'm great. Hi to everyone on the call. Thanks for taking the time to listen to Mike and I have a chat today. Really pleased to be here.
Great, thanks. Now, I was preparing for this by creating some really tough and hard-hitting 60-minute type questions for you today, but then I was reminded that you're a very important customer of ours, and as I know that you're also a wonderful person. So maybe what we'll do is we'll just stick to the questions about the industry and McDonald's. How's that?
Perfect. Sounds good.
Great. So I know that that one of the things that will be top of mind for a lot of the folks in the audience, COVID threw like everybody's plans into disarray earlier in the year, no doubt about that. But the scale of impact that is made on an international organization like McDonald's, well, it must have felt like completely overwhelming for you at times. I understand that you had to transition a Q&A lab into a remote operation. How did you manage to do that?
Oh, it's an interesting story because, as everyone knows, this year has been really filled with a lot of challenges, unexpected change, and a lot of unknowns. And as a technology team and equally as a brand, we've had to be really resilient and think creatively, think quickly. And as you know, March 16th, I think, was the date where everybody started working from home, and we had a year ahead of us with a very robust technology roadmap. Now, of course, when we look at our technology products, we can test many things remotely, but when we get closer to restaurant deployment, we really do need to test them on physical devices. And we weren't having anyone at the head office where the technology lab was. So we took a look and said, how can we keep our people safe and continue to move the business forward? So what we ended up doing was, and I'll put up a photo here as I'm chatting, is we moved the physical QA lab into 2 of our team members' homes. And it really was not an easy thing to do. We had to look at power supply. We had to look at how do you move equipment safely in what was at that point, heavy lockdown. We had to look at ensuring, these people weren't, living with spare bedrooms. So how could we help them accommodate this kind of a shift to keep our roadmap and our product deployment moving? And I think, it's a real testament to the passion that the people who work for McDonald's on my team have, is that they were willing to give up. In some instances, they were moving beds out of these rooms in order to accommodate these devices. It was a real achievement, and I think these kinds of stories really demonstrate the creativity that we can have under pressure, and then equally, the pride that the team had with this was enormous. So it was a great win for the team.
And there must have been a number of different stakeholders involved with HR and then all the team managers and stuff. Managing that component of it must have been exhausting for you.
You know, I wouldn't say exhausting. I would say it was certainly challenging, but the team really embraced the challenge. One, it allowed us to continue working on the things that were going to innovate our business, and so everybody leaned in, and there was a huge amount of support from our HR team in terms of bringing this in. There was a huge amount of support even from globally, because a lot of these systems hook into global infrastructure, so we had to really clear networking and look at different ways that we could get these devices live, and we've kept them there. To be clear, we're now not yet back in the office. We won't be back in until 2021. So, while it was, a lot of people thought it was kind of a crazy move and a big thing to move all of this hardware and technology into people's home, it has really absolutely paid off in terms of allowing us to continue to move forward and innovate and run our restaurants in a great fashion.
Well, it's certainly a testament to the organization and the way that you are organized and structured, because the lift on HR as well as the IT organization with and equipment and procurement and stuff, it seems like a mammoth undertaking. So congratulations. That's really very impressive.
Thank
Do
you.
you see other parts of your organization, doing something similar and following your lead a little bit?
Well, yeah, we definitely have had to rethink how we do a lot of stuff, whether it's at head office or with our restaurants. Certainly the way that we have gotten alignment with our system. So we have a very strong network of owner-operators. We have a very strong network of restaurant and crew and folks that work for the brand across the country. And we're very used to face-to-face with those folks to have those kinds of collaborative discussions, to bring our plans to life, to get their feedback. And we really did have to pivot and think about how we would do that in the virtual world, whether it's training or getting alignment on key business strategies. I think that's one of the areas that we have gotten consistently better at. We went into crisis mode in terms of we had very regular touch points with our operators as restaurants were closing, reopening, COVID cases. We were all learning together as we were in the first, I would say, 30 days of the pandemic, and it became evident that this was not going to end soon. We really had to pivot. How do we get alignment? How do we help the restaurants when we can't be there in the restaurant? So lots of different approaches in terms of virtual engagement, I think, is probably the biggest piece.
Yeah, and the fact that you were able to do it so quickly is just really impressive. It seems like one of the biggest business impacts of this whole global pandemic has been the tremendous speed at which organizations must now plan and then also implement the change, especially on the technical and the marketing sides of the business. I mean, take the issue with truckers, and it made all the Canadian newspapers, right? So truckers were still being, forced, well, not forced, but they were stepping up and they were moving product on the road, but they weren't able to pull over and simply eat and rest during lockdowns. And yet McDonald's, and it seemed like it was almost instantaneously, you guys stepped up with new curbside processes. Was that already baked into the plans? How was that anticipated? And how did you end up pivoting so very quickly?
Yeah, that's another great example of something that, would have been nowhere on the agenda a year ago. But when the restaurants closed on the inside and we kept our drive-thrus open, that worked for the majority of our guests. But as you pointed out, what we quickly heard, and where we heard it from was from our guests, so from the actual truckers themselves and from the restaurants, that, we have a network of people across the country who are driving these trucks and were delivering really important supplies during the pandemic. And with restaurants closing, many of them closing, if they closed the inside, they would close entirely. Because McDonald's has this percentage, a very high percentage of drive-through, we're able to keep the majority of our restaurants open. What we learned was, we had drive-through, but you can't fit a massive truck or a frontline worker emergency vehicle through a drive-through. And so they were really without a way to get food as they were journeying across the country. And what we did very quickly was said, we've got curbside, and McDonald's was a very early adopter of curbside. We had curbside in play long before the pandemic. But to be honest, it was largely underutilized and was sort of a nice add-on, but we hadn't put a lot of focus on it. So when we realized this dilemma that the truckers and the frontline workers in these bigger vehicles, whether it was ambulances or fire trucks, we very quickly pivoted and worked with the trucking associations to be able to put together a plan that not only allowed them to pull in with the app, order from curbside, and have the crew bring them the food. We also made sure that they were aware, because many people were not necessarily they had sort of given up, understanding they couldn't get through drive-through. So it really was a really great way where the company came together, the restaurants came together. We were able to make a really big difference with the there we go, with the truckers to help them in a way that was meaningful and real. We got a lot of thanks from the truckers, but what it came down to was, for us, being in the community is different from being part of the community, and this was really how could we, as part of the community, reach out and help these folks who were doing a really important job and needed needed that snack or that meal at in the middle of the night when they're traveling across the country. So it was a great win for the team.
Oh, no doubt. So, marketing in 2020 is perhaps more challenging than ever before for obvious reasons. Brand messaging, it's got to be authentic and delivered with genuine empathy, which requires first acting with empathy and care. And you kind of you touched on a little bit of it in the way that you're dealing with the truckers, but also I know there's tremendous programs that McDonald's putting out there, like Fries for Good. How much focus and how much of your resources can you put on charitable initiatives like that while having to transform your entire business operations and deal with all the new daily challenges?
Well, I think, as I said, being part of the community is a huge part of who McDonald's is. And, we were not alone in stepping up to help serve communities and help support Canadians during, the last 6 months. Certainly there are lots of brands out there that have done interesting things. When I look at McDonald's and our brand purpose, which is feeding and fostering communities, that can be anything from our crew to the Canadian farmer to franchisees or suppliers. And as we looked at opportunities to do that, one of the things that became evident was, really how do we help support the frontline workers? Everybody knew the tremendous pressure that frontline workers were under. So many of our really amazing franchisees stepped up, delivered meals to frontline workers in hospitals, to EMTs, to folks to, one, to help nourish them, but really honestly to bring a smile to their face, because, as you sort of set up in the upfront, kids love McDonald's. There are a lot of fans of McDonald's across the country, and it's a lovely surprise to get a lunch or a dinner or a McFlurry delivered when you are working 24-hour shifts and really are just, exhausted. So we were thrilled to be able to help people with that. As we look back over the course of the pandemic, we delivered over 325,000 pounds of food to local food banks and other charities, and over 11,000 meals to folks like this in the photo. And you think about other areas. We delivered coffee to teachers on World Teachers Day just in October. There's been a lot of things, but you did mention Fries for Good, and I did want to spend just a minute on that, because that is something I think, as we thought about as a brand, what can we do? So the initial activation of Fries for Good was earlier in the year, and we recently re-implemented it because it was so successful in terms of raising money for the Canadian Red Cross earlier in the year. We recently brought it back to help, what I would call the heart of McDonald's, which is Ronald McDonald House Charities in Canada. And not-for-profits, obviously very, very hard hit by COVID from a funding perspective. RMHC had to close only a few of its houses, but definitely, we as a very strong supporter and, founding partner for RMHC wanted to help. So from the 10th to the 30th of November, we ran this campaign so that every fry that was purchased proceeds, part of the proceeds of that purchase went back to RMHC. It was really, really helpful to RMHC, and I think, Canadians felt great supporting such a wonderful charity. The other thing, when I think about technology and I think about empathy and then equally marketing, and a great way to bring that together and the way that we've been able to do that through, again, RMHC, is with the pandemic, people really weren't as interested in handling money. So whether it was change that they would have typically have, popped into an RMHC box before, whether they were paying through their mobile app, and we don't right now have a way to donate to RMHC through there. So what we did is we enabled it on our kiosk, the front counter, and the drive-through that you could round up. We call it round up for RMHC. And you can round up your meal, and that roundup then is allocated to the charity. There were so many people that were hard hit by COVID, and when we think about branding and purpose, I think these are great examples of where we felt we could pitch in. We're a big brand, we have a lot of resources, and we reach a lot of people. So when we lean in for good, it can make a really substantive difference, and we were thrilled to be able to do this for the charity.
100%. And it sounds like there are so many great initiatives. I'm curious a little bit about the origin of some of these great ideas. Do you have some of these things that are being percolated from the grassroots themselves, coming up from employees and coming from the store owners, or are these typically thought through at the corporate level and then driven out nationally?
It's a bit of both, and I think that's the benefit of what we call the McDonald's system. And the system really is our restaurants, our franchisees, our leadership, our employees. As an example, the Fries for Good was something that we launched and brought out, but the return of Fries to Good was something that was a collaboration within our restaurant leadership. So we have operators that work with us, passionately on brand planning and execution. And this was brought forward as a part of that collaboration. It's how could we continue to support RMHC? How do we deliver a great experience to our guests and make it easy on the restaurants? Because obviously during the restaurants, there is many different procedures we had to put in place with restaurants dine-in open, dine-in closed, reinventing curbside, the drive-through experience being layered on with all sorts of COVID protection. So it needed to be operationally simple, but have a really also equally simple brand message. And if you look at that image there, it doesn't get much simpler than that in terms of execution and equally impact, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. So, we know that that McDonald's is the tremendous brand and has had tremendous success. You yourself, by virtue of your personal success, have, when people think of women in technology, you've become very visible. And women who have not only had to struggle in business, but especially in the tech world, now have additional challenges that are thrown at them. Whether it's increased family issues with kids being at home and scheduling pressures and, of course, medical worries. How have you been able to address these added stresses, and how does that impact, the way that you manage your team and the people in your organization?
Well, it's a great question, and a real passion point of mine is the conversation around women and technology. You're right. The gender gap in technology is a big one, and I recognized, when I took on the CTO role at McDonald's, that I had an opportunity to make a change within our internal organization. We have women definitely drop off the technology leadership track. When you look at, for a very long time was the only CTO globally, and we now have a great woman running technology in our U.S. business. So I have someone at the table with me. But I recognize I had an opportunity to help change the conversation, to help bring awareness to the conversation. And so we formed an organization at McDonald's, which is called Women in Technology. Very simple, straightforward branding. But, really the idea was to start the conversation to help drive what I would call moving the dial. We work actually very closely with an organization called Move the Dial. They've been a key partner of ours. And to your point around the pandemic, there's a really interesting study that has come out from McKinsey called Women in the Workplace, and they do it every year. But this year obviously had a very different angle on it, and as they looked at the impact of COVID on women, a couple of key stats that I thought I'd share with this group is that women are 1.3 times more likely to be considering stepping out of the workforce right now because of the pressure the pandemic has placed on them personally and professionally. And in particular, the weight that is being felt on mother, senior, and Black women. And this is obviously with the Black Lives Matter movement and all of the conversations around gender diversity, racial diversity. This is a real red flag, I think, for the industry and for companies as well. Working mothers are taking on an unfair share of the workload in terms of childcare and homeschooling. So the double shift that they were doing before, where they were doing mothering and working, they're now doing homeschooling and sometimes care of elderly parents. And so as we looked at that as a company and thought about how do you manage that with your team, and I still have a very firm desire to continue to have this conversation around increasing women's presence and leadership in technology. I think it's about managing your team with grace, honestly, and empathy. We talked about empathy before. You have to really understand that everybody's situation is different, that everyone is managing through this, and there have been, peaks and valleys. I can tell you as a mom, the summer was tough when we were trying to figure out summer camps, and then they all disappeared. And then, the return to school was a nightmare because no one knew what to do, what was happening. So all of these extraneous pressures on people, women in particular, in many cases, it's challenging. And then the pressures of working in an uncertain environment. So manage your team with grace, with empathy, touch base with your people more frequently than you would, because I feel like, in this virtual world that we live in, I just realized, it's likely that I will go an entire year without seeing the majority of my team. And when you really stop and think about that for a minute, a full year without seeing the people that you're used to seeing every day, there's a very interesting team impact and a dynamic there. My team knows that they get their work done when they can and on their schedule. And they know to reach out for support. And some people are early birds, some people log on later at night because they need the midday to help with homeschooling. So we've been really flexible. But ultimately, again, I go back to empathy and grace because I think those are the two keys for me.
Lara, do you think that the pandemic is accelerating the opportunity for women in technology, or do you think that it's going to just cause those additional challenges to prevent the next generation of women in technology?
I think we're at big risk, to be honest. Looking at the research and in talking with folks, 1 in 4 women, this again is a McKinsey stat, 1 in 4 women are contemplating, what they would have thought unthinkable 6 months ago is how do they downshift their career, because they right now they're not able to cope with the pressure of the role that they're in. So they're considering, like, maybe if I take on a bit less at work, it'll make up for the extra pieces that I'm taking on at home. And we're at risk, I think, of actually losing much of the progress that we've made and then potentially even backsliding. So that's where I think from a corporate perspective, team leaders, we really need to be mindful of how we navigate through the next 6 to 12 months while we get to a vaccine, as you talked about, but how do we really intentionally and purposefully ensure that doesn't happen? And it will take, a real conversation with leadership, a real conversation with the team, and potentially thinking differently about what work looks like for certain people in certain roles as we manage through this.
Absolutely. I'm going to shift gears just a moment. We'll talk about the future. And so with great uncertainty of knowing what next year or even 3 years from now is going to look like, how, as a manager and one of the visionaries on the IT side, how are you mapping out these technology plans for the company? And, you know, what's actually next for McDonald's?
Great question. You know, we have been on a transformation journey for, let's call it 5 to 6 years. And I think much of the work that we did has put us in a great place today. So I look at the work we did with our mobile app, bringing on delivery, turning our drive-through menu boards to digital. All of that work was planned pre-COVID. Our opportunity now, as we look at the growth and the future of our brand, is how do we accelerate those digital pieces? You know, that the study that Publicis Sapient and Adobe did, I think it highlighted a lot of the things that folks in QSR know to be true, that mobile is going to be at the center of the future. You know, it's there today. I think what the pandemic done has just accelerated that. Data and analytics equally. So when I look at McDonald's and our goal of being the leading omni-channel restaurant with the absolute goal of delivering the best, safest, most excellent guest experience that we can in our restaurants so that our guests can get our food quickly and enjoy it, it means we need to double down on a couple things. One is digital, the second is delivery, and the third is drive-through. And those, what we would call our 3Ds, are the areas when I think about how can technology not only be an enabler, but also be a strategic accelerator. Those are the three areas. So a couple of things. One is we've got our digital menu boards that are now almost at the point of full conversion. And we bought, I'm going to say it's probably 1.5 years, 2 years ago, we bought a company called Dynamic Yield. We McDonald's. It was one of the biggest acquisitions that we had made in the history of McDonald's, and it really is about leveraging AI, starting with our drive-through. So how do we take restaurant-specific data, marry it with, you know, environmental data, whether it's weather, et cetera, and drive average check at the drive-through with our guests, and give them suggestions, so it's a suggestive sell environment that will help them, you know, discover more great and wonderful things about McDonald's and help us sell more food without impacting any operational pieces. You know, speed at drive-through, obviously very important to us. So all those things are being tracked, but the drive-through is one of the biggest pieces for us in terms of data and analytics, 100%. You know, we've got delivery, McDelivery, which we're live in Canada with 3 partners, Skip the Dishes, Uber Eats, and DoorDash. It's a huge opportunity for us. So lots of thinking about how we become the global leader in food delivery. We have big ambitions. We've got a strong starting point. There's tons of momentum. It's really, it's a big lever for us. And then the third D, really digital, is just continuing to drive our digital foundation and leveraging the data that digital gives us in terms of creating a more personalized and customized relationship with our guests. That's key. But also looking at how do we continue to evolve that mobile experience, drive things like curbside, you know, that experience that digital unlocks there. Well, great for our truckers, 100%, but equally fantastic for mom and dad who are pulling into a parking lot with kids and see a long line at the drive-through. They can pull into a curbside spot, you know, enter and the information into the app and have their food brought to them. So looking at how does it unlock more in our guest experience, I think, but equally at the end of the day, those 3 things are probably our biggest bets from a strategic perspective in this space.
Very cool. I just want to take a moment and remind our audience that Lara has graciously agreed to take some questions from the audience as well, so please don't forget to put those in the question chat box on the left-hand side, and we'll get to as many as we can during this session. And again, if we can't get to all of them, no worries. we'll get you a response in the email that goes out afterwards. But I just wanted to follow up to your last point there, Laura. You know, I think that if somebody wanted to sit back, have that little philosophical, discussion that says, what really is, what's McDonald's at its core? Somebody could say, well, of course, it's a restaurant and it's a provider of food, and they wouldn't be wrong. And then you could have another person, such like myself, who comes from a marketing background, and say, well, at its core, McDonald's really is a marketing, leader and really phenomenal at being able to get their messaging out and build that branding, not only in the U.S. And Canada, but globally, and have that consistency, and that's cornerstone of its success. But today, I look at this, and after hearing what, you today, there's a real argument to be made that McDonald's is really a technology company. You went out and you purchased dynamic yield. You're being able to take these great applications and implement them with success at real time, at scale. So, I mean, do you ever worry about, the identity of McDonald's, or is it really a combination of those three things and maybe even more?
Yeah, it's interesting you should say that we're a technology company, because I think that reflects a shift in the brand's thinking. 10 years ago, technology was really about the point of sale and some of the restaurant infrastructure. What we have changed, I think, in the conversation and then in the action plan is technology as a strategic enabler. And that acquisition of Dynamic Yield is one. We acquired another company called Apprente, which is about voice technology. Obviously, voice technology and ordering go hand in hand. There's another, we've set up a tech lab on the west coast of the U.S., which is fully dedicated to looking at how we continue to innovate and drive. So marry that with, to your other point, McDonald's as one of the most iconic brands in the world, and just the ability of the marketing to deliver a great experience, to deliver strong messaging, to drive home our purpose and our values. You marry those two, and I think that's where we are today, where the intersection of technology and marketing is really becoming real. And as we're building out these guest-facing experiences that are fully enabled and powered by technology, I think that's where the power of the McDonald's brand is really going to shine, is our ability to mesh those two things, amazing marketing, strong foundational and innovative technology together, I think will make us unstoppable in terms of how we continue to iterate the brand to meet the needs of our guests, the needs of our crew, and allow us to navigate through this, what I would call recovery phase, into whatever hopefully better things that 2021 brings us all.
Indeed. Phil, now's a great opportunity to bring up our second polling question, if you don't mind, sir. So here we are. We're going to ask the audience. We've talked about the future a little bit. What are your thoughts? Looking to the immediate future. So in the next 5 years, how do you believe contactless options will evolve? Are they a temporary trend? Are they an important service for restaurants, and they'll continue to be? Or will they become the primary method of service in the QSR industry? I've got my own thoughts on this one. I'll be interested to hear what Lara has to say. But right now, it's overwhelmingly that it's an important service for restaurants, and it will continue. My take on this, Lara, for what it matters, is I think it's going to be the primary method. I really, truly do. And I think that it's only for positive reasons, and that being that people get used to it, and that there's the speed at which people want to transact, and there's an opportunity for individuals that just love the convenience of being able to use third-party delivery services, or, of course, the McDonald's app. What are your thoughts on this one? Do you think this is something that's going to go away?
Yeah. No, I don't think, absolutely it's not going to go away. I think, if we're looking at a 5-year timeline, I think there's a decent shot that, even as we look at our restaurant of the future, and our format of our restaurant. You know, right now our traditional restaurant sits on a fairly sizable piece of land with lots of parking and area for the drive-through. You know, as we look forward 5 years from now, that has a fairly decent shot of evolving into something different. And I do think that the contactless piece will become more and more important. Whether it will be the primary by 5 years, I think we have a shot at that. I'm not 100% sure, but definitely I think it will be a much stronger part of the mix. The explosion that we have seen in delivery on our business has been remarkable, and I think people are really, really getting familiar with that and understanding the benefits of it. So I guess you and I'm sort of a bit in the middle of where you are. You seem to be more convinced, but for sure it will be critical to be excellent in the contactless space.
Well, I should preface that by saying that I come from a family that really appreciates the ability to transact without engaging other people. and maybe I've just become my old man. Yeah.
Yeah. COVID has been the introvert's dream, right? Yeah. Like all these introverts, like I've been prepping years for this. Let me stay at home.
You know, I've become my father in many ways in that, you know, back in the day when the banks went to ATMs, he was just beyond himself. He thought that was the greatest thing in the world. And then when it went to digital banking, oh my goodness, I thought he's never going to leave his house. And that's quite possible.
That's amazing.
And now guess what he's doing?
That's amazing.
He's ordering McFlurries from you guys.
As he should. Tell him to carry on. Carry on. I support that.
As he should. Great, thank you. Hey, what we're going to do is we're going to pivot right now. We'll go to the Q&A portion. I'm going to encourage folks, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. We'll get to as many as we can. We have one question that's popped already. So McDonald's is a very large organization. The focus seems to be split, obviously, because not only do you have external communications to your customers, how do you manage communicating to your large staff internally? And what kind of role does technology play in that?
Well, great question, because, you know, one of the things we had to do very early in terms of communicating with our employees was pivot. We had a plan, a very lovely, you know, very conservative, measured out plan to move everyone onto SharePoint and Microsoft Teams and that whole suite of tools. And then literally, as everyone knows, you know, everything changed overnight, and we had to fast track that like I had never seen a plan be fast tracked before, because we needed people to have the ability to connect and collaborate and do that effectively. If I had proposed the plan that we did during COVID to my executive team and to the company before COVID, it would have been shot down as impossible. And I think, you know, what COVID has taught us is that we underestimate, I think, sometimes our employee base and their ability to adapt to change. It wasn't easy. It wasn't entirely without bumps, but you know, we've moved into that Microsoft Teams, SharePoint environment that has allowed us to be much more collaborative, and we're continuing to roll out capabilities. But the other thing that we've done, and I think it's really important, is we've actually increased our touch points with the folks inside on the employee side of headquarters in order to ensure that they know what's going on, that they feel like they're being engaged. So where we would have had a town hall maybe once a quarter or once every 6 months, we've had, in the early days, we had employee town halls every week. And then, you know, as things became more steady state, we moved it back. But the interesting thing with my team is, you know, my leadership team, we started meeting every day at 9 a.m. from 9 to 9:30, and we would come in with whatever list. And I keep checking with them to see if they're sick of it. You know, like, hey, guys, we never did that in the office. We never had a half hour where we talked every single morning. But we started doing it virtually, and I think what we've learned is it's a really valuable way for the team to one, learn what's going on, but two, to bond and engage. And I feel, oddly, that we're closer as a team virtually than we were in person. And I don't know if there are other people out there who have seen that happen, but for sure, I have far more contact with my direct reports now than I did when I was in the office.
Interesting. Yeah, it seems like it's always on now too, right? So it's easy to have those virtual meetings. I know that when you typically go in the office, one of the downfalls is that, people are spread out and you don't want to talk to somebody because they look busy at the time. And now you can schedule these things in advance and have regular touch points. That's great. Another question came in from the audience here, Lara. Have you seen a difference in consumer behavior across different markets?
That's a really good question. We have definitely seen differences in terms of the way that people have adapted and used some of our digital products. We have seen, I would say, stronger adoption of digital, and not surprisingly, in some of the Asian and European markets in terms of the ability to get folks into the new behaviors that we are building, whether it's mobile ordering or scanning digital coupons versus paper coupons. I would say the Canadian guest has been slower to adopt the digital and move away from more traditional. Now, we haven't helped them, to be clear. We have we launched a coffee rewards program in our mobile app with a very strong paper on the cup loyalty program. So, we kind of gave them the option to choose versus saying, hey, move on to digital. But definitely, I think from a digital perspective, there has been different areas, and that's one of the great things about the McDonald's system is we can go to markets that are seeing different results and learn from what they've done. And, I have shamelessly stole many things from my counterparts in Germany or the UK or Australia, and even some of the smaller markets like Switzerland or Poland that are seeing results, and vice versa. And I think that's one of the great things about McDonald's is, we look at like, how do we launch this, or what should we do? Okay, well, what did these guys do, and how can we steal and learn from them? So it's one of the benefits of being a big brand for sure.
It's interesting. A little bit of a follow-up on that. Previously when I was earlier in my career, I was with a company called Xerox, right? So we often looked at Canada as a bit of a test market because it was close enough to the U.S., the big market, where we could try things without really getting in too much trouble from a marketing perspective and maybe from a technology perspective. Do you have that kind of feeling at McDonald's as well? Like, is Canada one of those markets where you can go out and you can try stuff without the huge risk of failure and be able to lead the way from a technology perspective globally?
Yes, and sometimes that is a blessing and sometimes that is a curse. So, being the guinea pig, the great thing about Canada is, we are literally a tenth the size of the U.S. So we've got just over 1,400 restaurants. Well, actually, we're getting close to 1,500 now, and the U.S. has about 15,000. So when the global teams are looking to test something, they often will come to Canada and say, can we run a little bit of a test here? Let's launch this first. Can you? And sometimes that's great, right? We get the benefit of the early technology, the early innovation, and we go forward. And it's a really, really great thing to be early. And honestly, in all transparency, sometimes things don't work. And, we're lucky and fortunate to have a system that is very focused, like the Canadian system. Our franchisees are very leaned in on innovation. So they give us a handshake and say, we recognize in order to go quickly, some things will fail. And if we aren't failing, that means we're not innovating fast enough. And so I think we have that mindset in Canada. That's sort of, our owner-operators, our franchisees, they're entrepreneurs, all of them. So they've all got that little piece of DNA that says, I want to go faster, I want to be better, I want, a bigger ROI. So for sure, Canada, we tested pizza, and it's not coming back. But many years ago, that's a great example of our innovation. We tested pizza. We tested the plant-based burger here in London. And there's lots of things that we test outside of technology. We're a great market for product innovation as well. So if you live in Kingston or London, those are often the areas that we seem to do a lot of our test and learn in. So you've probably benefited from some of that innovation.
Excellent. Another quick question from the audience. Do you have any best practices or ideas that you can share that companies can implement or use to encourage promoting women in technology?
Yes, I do actually. And the one that I would highlight is one of the things that I have learned in my discussions with folks that are experts in this space is that women women tend to network less than men. And one of the things that we are launching at McDonald's as a, hopefully to counterbalance that a bit, is a peer circle for women. We're connecting women around the globe and allowing them the opportunity to network and have conversations and dialogues with their peers to enable that conversation around networking. And I think hand in hand with that is formalized mentoring and sponsorship within an organization to ensure that women are being given, as much opportunity and access to leadership and those programs as they can. So if I was to say one thing, I would say make sure that you have a very strong mentoring program in your organization. Find your talent, and it's not always top talent. What I found really interesting is sometimes if we focus on the folks that are the top talent, we often miss out on some really strong performers that just need that extra boost to get them to the top talent. So if you're doing like the two-box model, take a look at some of the folks that are almost there but not quite, and make sure that you focus against them as well.
Excellent. It's funny that you mentioned networking. And the reason I say that is I love LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. It's a way that I can connect with a lot of our customers and prospects and get feedback from them. And I know that you're prolific on LinkedIn as well, and it always brings me a smile to my face when I see your posts come across, because you're so incredibly positive on LinkedIn, which I love. I think it's phenomenal. And one of the things that I get to see, and I'm going to throw this out there, is that McDonald's is growing. And there's always opportunity, especially on the technology side. I've seen stuff from yourself and from colleagues of yours recently. For anybody who is listening to this or in the audience today, if you're thinking about an opportunity in the digital world, look to McDonald's, because you guys are obviously on the forefront, and the opportunities are coming available, and it's a phenomenal organization based on what we heard today. So, Laura,
thank you for that
kind
plug.
of my segue. Yeah, well, it's you know what? Honestly, this is kind of my segue to say thank you, because people look at this and say, oh, well, it was great to hear Lara for 60 minutes. The reality is it takes more than 60 minutes, and you've put some great thought behind some of the questions and slides and our prep calls. So I tremendously appreciate, and I know the audience appreciates, the time and effort that you put in there. And also thank you, and please take this back to your team for the stuff that you're doing at McDonald's, because Ronald McDonald House, to me, is the pinnacle of what corporate charitable initiatives should look like, and the way that you deliver results and you provide tremendous benefit to those who receive it at a crucial time. And these days it's needed even more than ever, and you're doing that as one initiative, in addition to all the other stuff that you're doing with Fries for Good and all that fun stuff. So please take that back to your team and let them know that it certainly is appreciated and it's recognized. And thank you for that.
Well, thank you. It was lovely to chat, and thanks for the folks on the call for hanging in with us. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. It was great to be here.
100%. Hey, Phil, are you there? What would be a great thing to do is let's run that third poll and find out what people thought of our session today. What do you think?